Dan, I want to ask you about central bank policy then, because we've seen through the lens of China, they had a strong recovery, and now we've entered the phase where a little bit of extra support has been required, namely around the triple R, and all sorts of questions about this slowing down on the back of some of those super pandemic trends. Is it likely that the United States will go through that same economic recovery journey? And what does it mean for a central bank that once it starts to retreat, it's very hard to do a U-turn?
Well, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that we're seeing in the United States is that the recovery is very front-loaded, and that the impact of the stimulus checks is still, let's say, disguising quite a lot of the concerns, of the risks that of a slowdown afterwards. If we look at Asia, the slowdown is not that severe, and we can be at least comforted by the fact that the export sector starts to come back once the internal demand starts to weaken, or at least the trend in the internal demand starts to slow down. So what central banks need to pay a lot of attention to is to keeping the perverse incentives. One of the big problems that I see in the developed economies, particularly the United States and the Eurozone, is this zombification of so many companies. And therefore, what central banks need to do is to start talking about tapering as quickly as possible.
A lot of people, Dan, have been calling a stock market reckoning for all of the factors you just mentioned as well. And yet we keep going up, we keep hitting record highs. Are we in 1999, or are things different?
No, I think that things are slightly different in one thing, is that unlike in 1999, the bond market is extremely focused on the central bank action. And when you look at, for example, the central bank action in sovereign bonds and the massive asset purchases, stock markets are not that expensive compared to where bonds are. Therefore, I think that the difference this time is that unless we see a big change in the bond market, which is extremely unlikely, and we're seeing it despite the rise of inflation, unless we see that type of change, it is very difficult that we will get a massive scare. We might get a correction. Of course, we might get a correction. Markets are expensive. But so far, earnings and margins are supporting equity markets better than solvency and liquidity are supporting bonds.
All right, my friend, lovely to hear from you, and we'll catch up with you again soon, no doubt. Dan Lacalle, who is Chief Economist at Trésis Gestion.